This video is to help introduce adding fractions. First, we're going to talk about what it looks like when you don't have x's in it. That's not what we're going to be doing in our class, but it should be something you've done in the past. So if you look at these first three examples, notice that they don't have any x's in them. So this is just a refresher, and then I'll start, when we get to problem number 2, that's when we start doing the Algebra 2 version where it has all the x's in it. So when we add fractions, one thing we have to look for when we're adding fractions, we have to have a common denominator. What that means is we need to have the same number. That's what common means. And then the denominator is the bottom. So before you can add fractions, you need to double check that you have the same number on the bottom of your fractions. Right here, when I'm looking at the denominators, they are both a number 4. So I do have a common denominator, which means what happens when I add fractions is the denominator stays the same. It does not add together. You just keep the denominator the same. And then if I add 1 plus 3, I get 4 out of 4. Now, one thing we've been practicing is because we have a 4 on the top and the 4 on the bottom, technically this could cancel out and make a number 1. But just for the purposes of this, I'm not going to cancel anything out. There's not going to be a lot of canceling in this part of the chapter. The most important part here is that we know that we need a common denominator, and then we can also know that we need to add the tops together and the bottom stays the same. So if you want to change this into a number 1, that's fine, because 4 divided by 4 makes a 1. But if you said 4 over 4, you notice the common denominator. Again, I'm looking at the bottom of the fraction. My denominator is 15. My other denominator is also 15. So I have the same number on both, which means that I can add my fractions together. The bottom of the fraction stays the same, so it's still going to be 15, but then the top adds together. So I have 8 plus 3. That makes 11. Now on this one, there's nothing that I can simplify, because an 11 and a 15 don't cancel out, so they don't make a number 1 or anything like that. Now, on this next one, when I look at the denominators, I have a 7 and I have a 14. That is not the same. So I don't have the same number on the bottom. That means I need to do something to it in order to make the same number on the bottom. When I look at the number 7 and the number 14, there are several numbers that they could both be made into, but I think the easiest number is 14. This one's already a 14. This one could easily be made into a 14 if I multiplied by 2. So I'm going to do times 2, right? That's a times sign, not a point, a decimal point. Now here's the thing about a fraction. It's kind of like an equation. You have to keep it balanced. So if you do something to the bottom of a fraction, you have to do the same thing to the top of that fraction. So because I said I wanted to multiply the bottom by 2, I also have to multiply the top of that fraction by 2. This fraction I didn't need to change. It was already a 14, so that means I don't need to change the top either. So let's see what that becomes. I have a 2 times a 2, that becomes 4. I have a 2 times 7, that becomes 14. I said I was going to leave this one alone. And now when I look at the denominators, they are the same. So I have a 14 here, I have a 14 here. Now that I have a common denominator, I can add my fractions together. So I know that the denominator is still going to be 14, and then I'm going to combine the tops. I have a 7 on the top and a 14 on the bottom. Some of you might recognize that that simplifies to 1/2. So if you want to write your number as 1/2, that's fine. But again, for what we're looking for is we're looking for the fact that the denominator stays the same and that we combine the tops, like we add the tops together. So that should be a review about fractions. If that feels a little bit unfamiliar, hopefully when I keep going through some problems, it'll make more sense. But This is not what you're going to be doing so much. It's just the ideas. What you're going to be doing is now, once they have x's in them. The other thing I want to point out is I didn't find any excluded values here because there were only numbers on the bottoms of my fractions. And since there's numbers, they're not zeros, so I don't have to find excluded values. Starting here, now I have x's on the bottoms, so I am going to have to go back and find my excluded values. I'm looking for a common denominator. So right here I have an x, right here I have another x. The denominators are the same. So just like I did up here, my denominator is going to stay the same, but I'm going to combine things on the top. So I have a 1 plus a 7, that makes the number 8. I can't cross anything out, so that's where I'm going to keep my answer. My answer is 8 over x. But there's a number that can't go here and here and here, and it's the same number. For all of these problems, or all of these fractions, x cannot be 0. So my answer is 8 over x. My excluded value is x can't be 0. Next one, I have an x plus 1 on the bottom and another x plus 1 on the bottom. So both of the denominators are the same, which means I can go ahead and start adding them together. Since I have an x plus 1 on the bottom, when I add them, my denominator is still going to be an x plus 1. But now I have a 3x plus another x. I'm not doing multiply, right? That was the last unit. I'm doing plus. So if I had a 3x and I added, this is like a 1x to it, now I have a total of 4 x's. I cannot cross off this x and this x because this x is like just an x by itself. This x is part of an x plus 1. So I can't cross anything off here. My answer is just 4x over x plus 1. But there's a number that I can't put here. So I'm going to make my equation. You don't have to. If you know the number, you can just write it down. But my equation would be x plus 1 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides and say x cannot be the number -1. Because if I put -1 here, -1 plus 1 would make 0. Zeros on the bottom of a fraction are not a good thing. They're not allowed. So my excluded value is x can't be -1. My answer is 4x over x plus 1. One more for this video, and then they do get to be a little bit harder after this. Looking at the denominator, I have an x squared and an x minus 3. I have another x squared and an x minus 3. So my denominators match. That means that I can add them right now. I have an x squared and an x minus 3. Right? I don't add the denominators together, it just stays the same as it was. But I am going to add the numbers on the top. I have an x plus another x. That can combine to make 2x. I have a -4 plus a -2. That can combine to make -6. So this is an okay answer, but from what we've been practicing, I noticed something about the top of my fraction. I have a 2x and a -6. So I think that I can simplify that. I'm going to change colors because if you got this far, that's a good place to be right now, but I just want you to keep in mind these two have a greatest common factor of the number 2. So I'm going to put 2 parentheses. When I factor out a 2 from a 2x, I have an x left. When I factor out a 2 from a -6, I have a -3 left. The bottom is pretty much as factored as it can go. And now I notice something. I have an x minus 3 on the top of my fraction, and I have an x minus 3 on the bottom of my fraction. So that can actually simplify and be 2 over x squared. So if you got this far, that's a good start. If you put that as your answer on a test, you would get most of the credit. But because there's some stuff that can cancel out, right, you should always see if there's something that can cancel out. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. But it should be the final answer 2 over x squared. And then I have to make my excluded values. I'm looking back at my original equation. I could look at my answer. The only problem, if I look at this answer, there was something that was crossed off. So I still have to do an equation for that one. So I'm going to make two equations. I have an x squared equals 0. I have an x minus 3 equals 0. A lot of you have asked me about this x squared, right? To get rid of a squared, I can do square root. A square root and a squared cross off. The square root of 0 is just 0, and I do not want it to be 0, right? Because if I put a 0 squared, that gives me 0. That would make the bottom 0. That would be bad. If I add 3 to both sides on this one, x cannot be 3. If I put a 3 there, 3 minus 3 would make 0. 0 times anything makes 0. That would be bad. So again, this could be your answer. This is a better answer because it's simpler. And then my excluded values would be x can't be 0 and x can't be 3. Please make sure you watch the next video as well, because now it's going to be what if we don't have a common denominator? How do we make it so it has one?